When I first saw her standing at the edge of the cemetery, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. A young woman, maybe in her mid-20s, clutching a faded photograph, staring straight at the coffin where my husband lay. My heart, heavy with grief, stumbled into a rhythm my hand felt since the day he slipped from my arms into the cold hands of death. The funeral had been quiet, almost serene. Friends whispered prayers, neighbors nodded with sympathy, and I felt the usual weight of loss press against my chest. But this woman, she wasn't anyone I recognized. She wore a simple black dress, eyes glimmering with determination, and in her trembling hands was something intimate, something belonging to him, to us. I wanted to look away, to tell myself I was imagining it. But her voice, soft but urgent, cut through the haze of my sorrow. "I'm his daughter," she said, and the words dangled between us like a thundercloud. I remember the smell of damp soil mixing with the faint scent of lilies. I remember gripping my own hands, knuckles white, trying to steady myself. And I remember thinking, I buried my husband yesterday, but today, I might be burying the version of our life I thought I knew. Something in me knew I couldn't walk away. I couldn't dismiss her like a shadow. And so, trembling, I stepped forward, letting the weight of what she was about to reveal settle around us both. Before that day, before her, life with Henry had been ordinary, quiet, and filled with a kind of gentle rhythm that only long marriages can know. Our mornings began with the hum of the coffee maker, the smell of his toast burning just slightly at the edges, and the soft, teasing arguments over who would walk the dog first. I'd brush the crumbs from the counter, humming under my breath, listening to the rain tapping against the kitchen window like it had secrets of its own. Henry had been my anchor. Not a man of grand gestures or sweeping words, but in the little things, his hand on my shoulder when the news was hard, the way he remembered the names of the neighbors' children, the quiet way he would fix my broken shelves without asking, I felt grounded, safe. Our home smelled of old books, polished wood, and the lingering perfume of the flowers I liked on the dining table. Our children were grown, scattered across the country with families of their own, and I found comfort in letters and sporadic calls. Life was calm, predictable, and full enough to feel whole. Even in the weeks before his passing, I noticed small things, his pens out of place, receipts tucked in drawers I hadn't seen in years, letters that didn't quite match the neat rhythm of his usual notes. I brushed them aside, thinking perhaps memory or age was playing tricks. I never could have imagined that the quiet rhythm of our lives would shatter with a single, unexpected claim. It started with small, almost forgettable things, the kind you notice but try to dismiss because grief already weighs too heavy. A letter slipped under my door, postmarked years ago, addressed to Henry. I didn't open it at first. I told myself the funeral would come, the morning would come, and now wasn't the time. But that envelope, plain and worn, kept tugging at the corners of my mind like a loose thread in a favorite sweater. Then there was the photograph she held at the cemetery, the one that froze me in place. It was a picture of Henry, younger, smiling in a way I hadn't seen for decades, with a little girl beside him, eyes wide and bright, her small hand wrapped around his. I recognized the smile, the tilt of his head, the warmth in his gaze, but not the child. Not ever. I tried to tell myself it couldn't be true. Perhaps she was mistaken, perhaps she was lying. But the way she said his name, with that trembling reverence, and the way the wind caught her hair, made my chest tighten with something that felt like both fear and sorrow. Later, at home, I found myself digging through drawers, finding old journals and letters, things I hadn't touched in years. Receipts, envelopes, notes in handwriting unfamiliar yet eerily close to his. My hands shook as I traced the ink, my mind a whirlwind of disbelief. Could Henry have kept this secret for so long? Could I have lived decades with him, shared everything, and never glimpsed this part of his life? The room felt colder somehow, the air heavier, as if it knew that a hidden truth was clawing its way into the open. And I realized, deep down, that no matter how much I wanted to ignore it, I couldn't. The day I finally spoke with her, I remembered the living room smelling faintly of the rain that had just stopped outside. Her hands clutched the photograph like a lifeline, and I could see the quiet fear in her eyes, the same fear I had felt every time I approached a letter or note that hinted at a life I didn't know. "I know this is sudden," she began, voice soft, almost fragile, "but my name is Clara. I'm Henry's daughter." I sat down heavily, gripping the arm of my chair until my knuckles were white. My heart pounded in a rhythm I hadn't felt since the funeral. Henry had a daughter? The words felt foreign, heavy, and impossible. "Yes," she said, swallowing hard. "He didn't tell you." I didn't want to believe he would hide me. But I had no one else. Her voice cracked, and I felt a sharp pang in my chest. As though grief and guilt had collided in one sudden strike. I asked her the questions I didn't think I'd ever ask anyone. When was she born? Where had she grown up? Why now? And as she spoke, filling in the blanks, I found my disbelief slowly giving way to an understanding I wasn't sure I was ready for. There were letters Henry had written but never sent, documents in his office tucked behind papers, and names signed at the bottom with love and hesitation. She wasn't lying. She was real. Tears gathered in my eyes, not for her, not for him, but for the years lost, the moments never shared, the milestones he had kept from me, from both of us. And yet, as I looked at her, I felt something stir, a quiet, tender recognition. She was his blood, yes, but also a piece of the life I thought I had fully known. I realized then that grief could expand. It could hold both sorrow and the strange, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, there was room in my heart to welcome her. I didn't know where to start, so I started with the small things. I made her tea, careful not to spill, watching her hands tremble around the warm cup. I showed her the garden Henry loved, the little patch of marigolds by the fence, the roses he never pruned properly, the bird bath where he used to feed the sparrows every morning. I told her stories, small, quiet memories, how he would hum while fixing the leaky sink, how he once stayed up all night to sew my dress for a work event. She listened, wide-eyed, like someone piecing together a puzzle whose image she had never seen. And in those moments, I saw the ache in her begin to soften. But I needed proof, for both of us. I sifted through old records. Letters tucked in drawers, photographs hidden in boxes under the bed. Each piece told the same story. Henry had been a father to her in his own secret way, never revealing, never abandoning. When I finally showed her the documents, birth certificates, school records, even letters from his friends acknowledging her existence, her hands shook. She fell into a chair, staring at the papers like they were fragments of a dream she didn't want to wake from. "Why now?" I asked softly, not accusing, just trying to understand. "I had to know my father's life," she said, voice low. "I had to know if he loved me enough to leave a mark, a trace, something real." And in that silence, filled with the faint ticking of the old clock and the scent of damp earth from the garden, I felt something shift. I was no longer just a widow, mourning a husband I thought I knew. I was a mother, again, welcoming a child I never knew existed. I reached out, letting my hand brush hers. "We'll figure this out," I whispered. "Together." For the first time since the funeral, the house felt warmer, less empty. The cracks in our story, though painful, were beginning to mend. And I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting what had been hidden, it was about choosing to love anyway. Word travels faster than grief, faster even than truth. By the time our family gathered for Henry's memorial reception, whispers had begun to thread through the crowd. Faces that had known him for decades now tilted in curiosity, some with disbelief, others with suspicion. And there she was, Clara, standing quietly beside me, holding the evidence we had gathered like a shield. My daughter, Elizabeth, was the first to approach. Her eyes wide, disbelief mingling with a cautious tenderness. "Mom, is this true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. Yes. She's Henry's daughter, just as she says. The silence that followed was thick, almost tangible, like the hush that falls over a church just before the preacher speaks. People stared, murmured, some stepping back as if the ground beneath them had shifted. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years muttered, "I never knew," and yet, there was no anger in my voice, no accusation in my tone, just the steady, unwavering acknowledgement of what had been, what was, and what could be. I watched Clara navigate the room, tentative yet composed. She greeted people carefully, accepted hesitant smiles, and for the first time, I saw her begin to belong. There were questions about inheritance, about rights, about what this meant for our family, but we faced them quietly, with honesty. Legal documents, conversations, confirmations, it all fell into place, not perfectly, but firmly enough to prevent chaos. The most remarkable moment came when my own children embraced her. They were cautious at first, eyes scanning, hearts measuring. But slowly, gestures of acceptance emerged, a hand on her shoulder, a shared memory of Henry's quirks, laughter from a story only someone who knew him intimately could tell. By the end of the day, I realized that truth, though disruptive, had the power to heal if met with patience and love. It did not erase pain, it reframed it. And in the warmth of that crowded room, with the scent of fresh flowers mingling with the faint trace of rain outside, I understood something profound. Families are not only made in secrecy or blood, but in the courage to see each other, fully, and choose connection anyway. The weeks that followed were quiet, almost sacred. Clara stayed with me, not out of obligation, but because a bond was forming that neither of us had expected. We cooked together, washed dishes while swapping stories, and I watched her discover the little things that made our home feel like his again, the squeak of the old floorboards, the way the sun hit the dining table at noon. The aroma of his favorite tea steeping in the kitchen. There were tears, of course. Tears for the years lost, for the birthdays he had missed, for the conversations that would never be. But there were also smiles, small victories, like when Clara helped plant the marigolds in the garden, her hands coated in soil, laughing as she tipped her head back to catch raindrops on her face. I became a mother to her in the ways that mattered most, teaching her to navigate our shared grief, honoring the father she had lost, and offering a steady presence when the world seemed uncertain. And in return, she brought me life I hadn't realized I was missing, the joy of discovery, the renewal of hope, the reminder that love can expand to make room for even the most unexpected arrivals. I realized that Henry had left us both gifts, to Clara, his blood and his memory, to me, a second chance at motherhood, at connection, at understanding that family isn't always about what's been done right, it's about the choices we make now, in the present, to nurture, forgive, and embrace. Even in the quiet moments, when I sit in the garden and hear her laughter echoing down the hall, I know we are healing. Not perfectly, not without scars, but deeply, tenderly, together. And now, my dear friends, I sit in the quiet of this house, the rain tapping softly against the windows, and I think about all the ways life surprises us, sometimes with sorrow, sometimes with grace. Clara is here, learning the rhythms of a family she never knew she had. And I am learning the resilience of a heart I thought had been broken beyond repair. Grief and love can coexist. Secrets, once uncovered, can teach us the depth of human connection. And sometimes, the most unexpected arrivals bring the kind of healing we never dared to imagine. I have learned that family is not only what we inherit, but what we choose to nurture, even in the shadow of loss. So I ask you, quietly, from my own little corner of the world, if someone you never knew existed suddenly claimed a place in your life, would your heart make room for them? Would you forgive, embrace, and rebuild? Tell me in the comments, my dear, what would your heart have done? And if my stories bring even a small measure of comfort or reflection to your day, I invite you to subscribe and walk with me through more stories of life, love, and the unexpected ways our hearts find home. Because, at the end of the day, we are all learning how to hold the pieces of one another with care.